How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, today's going to be a very serious discussion. We're going to be talking about the mental health of staff who work at very active facilities. These are the facilities that deal with a different type of inmate, and basically it's a facility that's driven by codes where staff is most of the time putting out fires. It's going to be a great dialogue because we're going to talk about how that affects us mentally, but also how it affects us and our ability to do our job effectively. My partner in today's discussion is going to be Russ Hamilton. But before we get started, let me go ahead and introduce our sponsors. First sponsor is American Military University. If you guys are looking to get a degree, seek higher education, bring experience into the classroom, check out American Military University. They're very supportive of what we do in corrections and also very supportive of what we do here on Tier Talk. And we also have Inmate Manipulation Decoded. This book does very well, sells very all across the country, even sold some books outside of the country, including Australia and Canada. If you guys need some training in inmate manipulation, get your hands on this book. It's a book dedicated from real life experiences, and not just myself, but other professionals in the field. This book is available on Amazon. We also have How to Succeed in Corrections, Lessons Learned While Working in a Prison. And this book has just tons of advice. I mean, this is a book I carry with me at all times. It's just great to be able to have something like this to reference, but also the key to this book is to add your own notes, create that legacy, pass it forward. That book is available through my publisher, which is Blue 360 Media. The link to that is in the description. I have another book coming out shortly, which has about another 40-something tips that could actually partner with this and partner with this. So we're kind of doing some really good complete training here, making sure that we got the basics. That's the key. And that book should be coming out shortly. That's in the process of going through the final edits. I'm expecting to probably see that book early next year. And then my next book I'll be working on soon, be kind of similar to this fashion here of Inmate Manipulation Decoded. I'm going to do a book on about 19 or 20 interactions, or how to manage interaction with inmates, basically 19 or 20 tips on how to manage inmate interactions, but I'm going to make it more personal. I'm going to share some stories so you could see how the tool I'm trying to express can be applied in our daily interactions with the inmate population. But that's a ways to go. I have covered those 19 topics before, but people have asked me if I could kind of crystallize that into a book, and I think that book will be a fun book if I can make it personal and share personal experiences that wind up developing into this piece of advice. So again, that's something that I'll work on. That's going to take a little bit. That may be a good size book. I'm going to have fun with it and maybe partner up with a couple of people that I've worked with before just to kind of add some insight into the book. But right now, those are the books that are out there. And I got one, as I said, coming out shortly, probably around January, February. What's up, Russ?
Anthony, how are you doing, sir?
Good. Russ, you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Not at all. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Started my career way back in the day in the 80s at San Quentin. Eventually, I retired, and then I went to work for a local probation department who was founding a juvenile facility, and I did 2 years there as a senior juvenile correctional officer. Now I work for a private company where we provide rehabilitation and reentry services for a local probation department and a local county jail where I am a case manager.
And Russ, I got to ask, Keepers of Chaos on Facebook, how we doing over there?
So Keepers, my baby, it's always growing. The quality of the people that are there are just astounding because, people are looking, for that forum, that provides, training and development and history and insight, and that's the actual purpose of it. We're not there to just, throw up memes or, complain about things. We're all about, solving problems, giving insight, and being actual advocates for this great profession, which is, something that I don't think a lot of other sites out there provide.
Yeah, and by the way, I love it. I mean, the chance to interact with other professionals in the field is definitely something I didn't have going in. So to see that being offered definitely shows how much we've evolved in, just being able to mentor those in the field and making sure that we have the best that are working with the best. This is a very unique topic. The reason why this came to mind is so I spent most of my career in very active facilities, especially when I crossed into prison management. But briefly, I had a chance to work at a facility that was very controlled. It was a different type of inmate. It wasn't as active. Again, you're still dealing with inmates, so you always got to have that what if. But it was a facility that was really just very controlled in its efforts. It was more of a treatment facility, and efforts from management would always be there to remind staff that, hey, don't forget at any moment something could happen. But the standard was a very controlled facility. Now, having that in my experience, but then quickly being lifted and going to another facility where it's a little bit more or a lot more faster moving because it's more unfortunately code driven. It's a different type of inmate. The staff mindset may be a little bit different because now, as we talk to staff, they're very aware of the dangers that these inmates present, but it's more of telling them that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, that is sort of, trying to keep them motivated and not feel trapped, which we'll go through. But one of the things when it comes to working at an active facility is that let me just put the first thing in. Let me just put the first tip in because I'm going to cross right into the first thing is the name of the show right here is called The Prisons Affecting My Mental Health. And the reason why I'm saying that is because when you work at a very active facility where codes are constant and that sort of becomes the defined routine, it could take a toll on you and both mentally, yes, but in your ability to be effective at the job. So one of the first things I notice is that when your mindset starts to shift from routine safe operations to routine expected chaos. Hey, Russ, let me ask you a question, Russ. When I tell staff that may work at a more controlled facility that, hey, always keep your mind prepared because you never know when shit could hit the fan. It's just to kind of keep them awake, let them know that, hey, at any moment something could happen. We are dealing with people that can be very unpredictable. Having said that, when you work in a facility that deals with those type of inmates where it is unpredictable at every moment, there's codes at every moment. These are the inmates that are within the jail of the jail, let's just say. It's a different mindset because they're aware of what reality is. They're aware of what at any moment can happen. So how does that mindset, when you have a mindset from the routine operations, which should be safe and orderly, to where the default of the facility seems to be code driven and rather chaotic, how does that affect the mentality of that officer or of that staff member who has to kind of work in an environment where the default of that facility seems to be chaotic and code driven because of the type of inmates that they are dealing with?
There's a few different, mindsets that come to play. And when that starts happening, whether it's, just the constancy of what goes on in that facility, or, if it's just, that particular season where you've got several months on end where a lot of things are going on, what tends to happen is staff tend to become a lot more reactive. And when you get into that reactive mode, you're no longer out there necessarily, trying to stop things from happening in the future because you become much more worried about the immediacy of what you're doing right at that moment in time, because that probably at some time during the day, you're going to be responding to a code, or you're going to be responding to two codes, or whatever the number is. And, that tends to put a damper on just your whole thought process, because then I don't believe that you're as effective in that mode because, you're just not out there able to, seek out and identify and deal with things before they actually happen. And so what I think happens is you get to that default setting, and it's really not something you can necessarily do anything about, because this is what's being placed on your plate. When something is placed on your plate, you have to eat it. And there's no other choice in the matter. And, when you have things coming at you, rapid fire like that, then, there's just no chance to go out and do anything else. And, it can really get you into that vicious cycle where you're no longer, looking at what you're doing as necessarily having value. You're looking at yourself as, just some stopgap measure, and you're just there to hold your finger in the dam until someone else comes to give you a break, and then you go home, and then you come back and you recycle, and your finger is in the dam again, trying to plug the leaks, and that can be very disheartening to people.
Man, I love that metaphor of putting your finger in the dam. Because if you want to add to that too, I mean, you put it here, but it's still going to crack in other places because the pressure's got to come out somewhere. But you're right. I mean, it makes you tend to lose value in what you're doing because at the end you're just reacting. And you mentioned something before because you covered a couple of things that I want to explore a little bit more because as we talked a little bit before the show. Now, remember, guys, this is developed dialogue, so we kind of talked in some areas that we want to discuss, but we really didn't go into depth into our point of view on those areas. We're going to try to explore that now. But Russ, I'm gonna one of the last things that we thought of to talk about today. I'm actually going to bring it up first because you said decreases collective morale, becomes very reactionary, trap, no control. I agree that when you work at a facility that's constantly active and it's going from one code to the next, you wind up having staff that tend to just be reacting in the moment because again, it's just the facility itself is what's controlling the efforts of staff because again the inmate here is a different type of inmate. These inmates are the ones that are highly problematic, and what they tend to do is they either pose a threat or they're just annoying, but either way they try to have some level of control because that's what it really is. It's a shifting control. They're either going to be extremely annoying, which splashing or being disrespectful or just non-compliant, or ones that are actually threats. But at any point when they're doing that, they're shifting the control away from staff and trying to take the control. Now, here you have staff all the time just fighting to not even try to get control, but just to get some level of even ground at this point, especially when you're working at a facility that's very active. Staff at one point, it's like, well, back in the day, we could fight and automatically establish that authority right off the bat. But here, because of how things are being pressured from the outside, staff at this point is just fighting to break even. And I think that the staff that work at very active facilities are very disenfranchised by the changes that are happening because they're the ones that are definitely going to be most effective because they're the ones that are going to be most effective because you're taking away the tools that they need to have to manage a higher level of authority. So at this point, the more you take away the tools, staff goes into survival mode, and all they're trying to do at this point is break even. I mean, it's sad to say, but that's the truth. They're trying to break even just for a second to breathe before they go into the next issue. I have talked to staff, on this channel through my email that basically say, Gangi, we know our facility is going to go from code to code. We know that. All we expect is that it doesn't all happen at once. We would like a breather in between. I mean, imagine that they settled for that. They settled for constant codes back to back. They just don't want them all to happen at once because they would like to have a breather. But Russ, you mentioned something that I would like you to explore more. But before we get to the decreases collective morale, can we explore the reactionary mindset, the feeling of being trapped or having no control, especially today?
It's, this is one of those things where, there's multiple things. First of all, let's just say, there's an element of the inmate groups, the inmate subgroups and whatever that are much more resource intensive than other ones are. And, that can be everything from those that are, maybe on PC, maybe those that are, extraordinarily dangerous, those that have, behavior issues, those that, have some type of mental health issues, all of those things come into play. And so when you put them into a situation where there's no dilution of those factors, that's where, staff are just constantly bombarded and inundated, not even necessarily with codes and incidents, but, there's just a level of their attention that has to go to managing these inmates, even if it's, not an active code or anything. And so what happens is officers tend to go through mental changes where they start to exhibit things, like hypervigilance, depression, substance use, and that can be drinking or illegal substances as well. And that becomes a vicious circle. And some of those things are driven by that resource intensive inmate population. Some of it can be driven by, a lack of leadership. Some of it can be driven by, policies that, aren't necessarily very popular. It can be driven, by management and by administration, whether real or imagined. And all of those things, it's kind of, this confluence of events, that just drives people into these bad mental mindsets and makes them very negative. And negativity, I don't want to be Pollyannish about anything, obviously, but where your default becomes, oh, I'm just going to be negative about everything. And I mean, I still see officers, out there on the line every day, even though I'm no longer, carrying the badge. That's their default setting. They're just, negative about everything. They're negative about the things in their life. They're negative about the things at work. And there's nothing that's ever good enough. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy then, where we can never get ahead of the curve. We can never make improvements. And it's simply not so. I know that it's hard. There's no doubt about that, because corrections is always conflict 100% of the time. Conflict with inmates, conflict with peers, conflict with supervisors. But you know what? If we were to take some of that negativity out, we could at least make some headway. And so I think that that's where it lies. And the label that I just, like to put on it is just about that resource intensive inmate. They're eating up our resources, and that puts us in a position where we feel that we can't win. But there's still value in, maintaining safety and security. It's not always easy to see when your mental mindset is that low.
Yeah, and when you're working in an environment that's constantly active, I love what Russ said. I mean, you do want to be hyper vigilant, but you want to make sure it doesn't cross into paranoia. Usually that's kind of translates into the outside world, where hypervigilance is great to have. Don't get me wrong, but it's a tool in the outside world that could also be a concern, because if you don't control that line, it could cross into paranoia. Again, I mean, we're living on these extremes, but it's true. Yeah, in corrections, you have to operate on extremes, but you have to be able to know that I don't want to cross it. I'm already at the edge already. I just got to be very careful, because I'm 1 inch away from crossing into paranoia. But Russ, I love the fact that you're saying reactionary. I love the fact that you're saying trap, because at the end of the day, we kind of mentioned this, but if the routine of it all is constant expected chaos, because that's the routine, that's the default of the facility. Like, if you're sitting there at the end of the day, and let's say you happen to have a day where nothing happens, and you're shocked that nothing's happened, and that seems to be the default mode. I think that does affect, I think that does affect the morale. I think it does affect the staff who are trying to be effective, but they only weigh their effectiveness in the outcome of what it is that they're trying to produce, which in this case here, at a very fast acting facility, at a very active facility, if you're judging your outcome based on quiet moments and moments of total control, you're not going to see the positive efforts or the positive effect of your efforts. Where, there could be some staff that work at solar facilities that know that they got control, and they're able to judge their effectiveness based on the outcome of a good working facility that really doesn't have any concerns on a daily basis. So I love what Russ said, because if you got people that are highly effective and they're working at these facilities that are very active, but they tend to judge their effectiveness based on, a quiet day that shows they have control. I think that could also be a mindset that could affect their morale, but also the morale of the team, the morale of management itself. Hey, Russ, before we shift to that next part, you did say decreased collective morale. If you're working at a very active facility, and you're trying to showcase how effective you are, but unfortunately there's still codes, and you tend to judge your effectiveness based on a more controlled, quiet facility. How are you able to look at your effectiveness differently when the facility itself seems to be chaotic?
Yeah, that's a tough one. People that have been around and heard me talk, I talk a lot about the difference between the proactive mindset and the reactive mindset. And there's a number of officers out there, I'm sure, who have maybe never operated in a situation where they can be proactive, because they're always in the reactive state, and they have no idea as to what that feels like to have the opportunity to go out there and actually seek out incidents, if you will, through searches, or investigating potential gang members and validating people and stuff like that. For them, it's all about, hey, I'm putting my running shoes on and we're going to get going. And so, like I say, I think that there's just an element of that that's driven by politics. There's an element that's driven by leadership. There may be leadership factions out there that don't want to get involved in the proactive mindset, or they only think in terms of being reactive to things. I just think it's difficult for me to put my finger on and to say what a good answer would be in that case. Maybe because corrections is just so broad, and maybe just because the situational things that come up in different facilities, it's just the widest spectrum that you can imagine.
If I can add, I want to add something before we go into the next part, is that there's short-term victories and there's long-term victories. When you're working at a very active facility, and let's say custody is constantly draining their energy dealing with short-term victories because they're running, unfortunately, they have to be reactive because the facility is that much unpredictable. Management and everybody above should be helping create long-term victories to kind of ease the flow eventually. So then we could partner with those short-term victories. So basically, yes, I do want everybody involved in long-term 100%. So let's get custody up there as well. But in the meantime, while we're putting out fires, the higher level should be thinking of ways to kind of permanently put out the fire. And then basically we can partner up short-term and long-term victories. I think, unfortunately, when you work at a facility that's very active, the short-term victories, the immediate reaction behind something really it's hard to celebrate because you're going right into another one. I mean, at facilities where you have constant codes and constant emergency situations, you want to show appreciation and recognition for those that go above and beyond, but having said that, there seems to be a daily routine. It's happening every moment, where you go to another facility that's a little bit smaller in their activity, and yeah, maybe these are rare moments, and then you can go ahead and write a little recognition, a little appreciation for someone that, let's say, put out a fire from an inmate the other day, and whatever, or found an inmate overdosing, and okay, it's rare, we can put something together and show recognition. But when you have a facility that's dealing with that on the routine, those recognitions and those appreciations are going to wear thin really, really quick. They don't want to see, oh, my name being brought up again. I mean, it's my unit. I'm doing it every day. I'm doing 5 or 6 a day. I want to see something from you. If you really want to appreciate me, show me something long-term that we're doing to stop this shit from happening. That would help me more, because again, appreciation starts to run thin when you got someone doing it 5 or 6 times a day. I mean, yeah, you could put it all together and maybe present something a little bit down the line. But in the media, these people don't want superficial, every day. Hey, by the way, it was a great job saving those 5 inmates the other day, and then coming back a couple hours later. Hey, I know you saved 2 more. I know that's going to wear thin. They want to. That officer is going to come back and say, hey, I like the fact that you're appreciating me. I like the fact that you're acknowledging me. But that also means there's a problem. So what are we doing to fix it? And I know I work with people like that are 100% correct in that attitude. It's like, hey, I get it, but the appreciations are running thin right now. I'm sorry, man. That's not enough to keep me fueled at this point. This is exhausting. So I don't want you coming down each time telling me I'm doing a great job. I want you to help me be more effective. What are we doing more long term? Because these people will come to the table and say, hey, guys, 7 or 8 a day I'm doing right now, overdoses or whatever it is. What are we doing to kind of work together to make sure this doesn't happen again? And again, does that make sense, Russ?
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's things that we need to be working to solve all the time, and that's just one of those things that we need to be trying to find the fixes. You can't expect staff to do well if they're always operating in an emergency environment. And thinking that, just because the codes are broken up and it's one here and one there, that's a perpetual emergency. And we wouldn't expect to send someone to a war zone and have them operate day in and day out for 20, 30 years and think that they're going to be just fine. We rotate those people out every couple of years. And it's the same thing with what goes on in corrections, but maybe even more so to some degree, because just the constancy of those codes, especially at those more active facilities. But even at facilities where there may be less incident action, there's still conflict. There's still danger. It just may be on a different scale. And so we shouldn't overlook anybody. And, I would really like to see, some efforts being made to make institutions more peaceable. I think sometimes, people just get in, like we talked about the default setting before, to this is just the way it is. This is the way we operate. Yeah. And we're no longer looking for good solutions. We're just, looking, to the next paycheck. And that's, I just don't think that's very smart. I think that there's, better things that we could do. There's, we need some more outside the box thinking on some things, and not to just let things fester and become the norm. When we let them become the norm, then we've lost all of our creative thinking, all of our innovation and things like that, then just go out the door. We accept it for the way it is. And there can't be any progress in a situation like that.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize that also with management too, because the moment you give up and you carry the attitude that this is going to be the routine, that's going to be a problem, because you're the one that have all the resources to solve the matter. Management has tons of resources if they know how to utilize them. So when you start getting into the feeling of being trapped and this is just every day, and you're not 100%, facing every problem with that energy that's needed, that's going to travel down to where staff is going to have what Russ said, that collective, the decrease of collective morale. If management is like, just another incident, and you're not treating each incident with 110% energy and trying to solve it more long term, especially with the resources you have, staff will get disenfranchised. The front line will decide, well, if you're not doing nothing, fuck it. I'll just, again, like Russ said, put the finger in the dam to stop the water from coming out. And again, just to go back, appreciation can run thin in highly active facility. I mean, just imagine, if you got a constant concern and you're not really doing nothing about it, and the staff on the front line just constantly reacting, they're getting drained. At one point, it's like, hey, I get it. You thank me. I get it. But I don't want to do this shit anymore. I got the first thank, that was great, but the second, the third, the fourth, come on, man. You want to thank me. Now I want to see behavior, not words. I want to see that we're doing something so I don't have to do this again. Because here's the other thing too, guys. Just, I know how staff think too, and this is true. You got all these incidences, right? And staff is being drained, and you're giving them the appreciation. But the moment you don't, is the, or the moment they don't step up because maybe their energy is drained, and that thank you is going to quickly become a liability. And I think staff realize that. It's like, yeah, you're thanking me now, but there's a bigger problem here. And the moment I don't respond, that thank you is going to switch to a removal. So I need help here. I need help long term. Don't think that the appreciation is going to keep me motivated when there's a long term thing, because I have seen appreciations become liability. I get as management, you appreciate people so you can keep things moving forward, especially where areas could have increased liability. But that thank you will shift the moment something's not being done, and then frontline will turn around and say, "Well, you could have done something more long term." Why? What are you talking? Well, you could have done something more long term. Now, unfortunately, I'm in survival mode. Russ, you said something. I'm kind of going on the thoughts here. We talked about when the mindset shifts from routine, safe operations to routine, expected chaos. The next part I wanted to touch on is it lowers levels of expected effectiveness, safety expectations lessen. Russ, you kind of mentioned this before, but just to kind of quickly touch on it again. If you feel that this facility is just constantly going to be chaotic, no matter what you try to do, there's always going to be another incident. I do believe people tend to give up on the proactive measures, because at this point, what's the sense of it all? I just have to respond. So I do think that when you have an active facility, I do think that the expected level of effectiveness does drop. I think the safety expectations lessen, because if I feel that there's always going to be another incident, I could have that mentality, like, why even bother? Why even bother? Because we're going to have to go through this again anyway. And now the problem is you lose what I feel to be the most important thing, higher level accountability. Regardless of how many times you have to write something, you should still continue to write it. I mean, you may say, well, it doesn't solve anything. Yeah, but not holding them accountable becomes worse, because to me, that's where the facility starts to gradually decline into what becomes accepted behavior. And then you start lowering the standard because no one's constantly reminding people of higher level accountability. I don't care what the outcome is, unfortunately. I'm not in control of that, but I'm going to keep on holding people accountable, because the moment you don't, to me, and Russ, I know you're going to feel me on this. The moment you don't hold people accountable, again, I don't care what the outcome is. I'm still going to hold people accountable. But the moment you don't hold people accountable is the moment you've accepted that behavior. I mean, do you agree with that, Russ? That's the gradual decline?
Oh, absolutely. Just the things that we tend to see, when we're talking about, what diminishes our effectiveness, what diminishes our safety, is the necessity of reserving energy. We kind of set some of that energy aside because we have an expectation that we're going to need some extra energy in the immediate future. And so we don't necessarily do this whole thing about, being proactive and preventative and preemptive, because we think that, instead of doing that, we're going to need it later in the day because something's going to pop off. We're going to need it later in the day because we're going to have to do some type of cell extraction. We're going to need it later in the day because we're going to have to go to some, higher profile of security. And so it's easy to make that argument, primarily because it's true, that those things, we pay less attention to them. We kind of round the corners, if you will, and we kind of, like we take some exceptions. We don't necessarily fulfill, policy and procedure, because what we are doing is we are conserving some energy, because we believe that we're going to need it in that immediate future. And you can't even say that that's necessarily a bad thing, because if you were to take and go ahead and just expend all that energy, and then you have this, massive riot or whatever pop off, then you have less resources to draw on from that point. And, it's just one of those things. There's all these trade-offs. And what is it that you're trying to trade off? There's never enough resources. There's never enough manpower. People are exhausted, and it's just kind of like trying to find a way to make it all work, and working in that emergent state. It just doesn't work over the long term. We talk about, like the mental color code of awareness, where you go from white to yellow to orange to red to black. If you're functioning, in that orange or red zone all the time, you're going to just diminish yourself. It's possible to go long term in that idealized yellow spot where you're ready and you recognize things, and you can actually come in and be effective. But when you operate at those higher levels all the time, it diminishes your efficacy, and you get down all the way to the point where you think that you're operating in red or orange, but you're actually maybe almost all the way down to white, because you don't have enough physical and mental resources to bring to the fight. And that's not smart either. I hope that made sense.
No, it does. And you know what? It made me want to think of something else that we didn't put in. I just want to add in. Russ, since you're real quick, so I want to make sure I put it in correctly. Since you're the expert in complacency, is it spelled COMPL?
ACENCY.
ANC. Complacency. Okay, good. So is that spelled right, Russ? COMPLACENC.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you a question, Russ. I don't want to ignore this thought. You know how we talk about staff that may not go through the routine and have to kind of be reminded that shit can happen at any moment? What about people that are constantly going through it, that are constantly dealing with, and all of a sudden, like, it's just another code? I mean, could they become complacent in their efforts as well?
Yeah, that's kind of the boy who cried wolf scenario. You hear these alarms, and I was just always of the mindset, hey man, it has to be 100% from the time you hear the code. You have to decide whether or not you're in the response field, or whether you're required to respond to that. And other people just, well, I'll just wait it out. I'll see what's going on. I'll kind of just wait. And that's going, that's actually suppressing yourself, below the reactive stage there, to where, you're at that point where you want to do the minimum required, you're at that least energetic state. And that's bad too, because, you have nothing left to give at that point. But you should, your duty requires that you do more than just that. That's not acceptable. But, I've seen officers just, that they just, it's just a mental bailout. They're no longer, they're not just, combat ineffective. They're any kind of response ineffective. And so, that's always bad. And that also, even, on the other end, of that, besides just the constant activity, just, the complacency of regular routine. If you're in a unit or a facility, or just an area that doesn't have much going on, and the routine is what matters. There can be a routine of constant activity. There can also be a routine of inactivity, right? And so it doesn't matter, even though those are two opposite ends of the spectrum.
It's the routine that brings it together.
Right. Complacency can be caused by either. And so that's really just, your mental capacity for dealing with your own complacency, because everyone's complacent to a degree. It's just part of who we are as humans, but being able to recognize it, categorize it, and take it from just something where someone says complacency, but being able to take it from that point and being able to, make it concrete. And when the principles of it, and being able to root those out in yourself, I always say, complacency, complacency will get you killed, and you won't even recognize it until it gets there. So.
Yeah. And you know what, Russ, it's great that we just said that, because, excuse me, guys, I drank that too quick. I like what you're saying, whether on either extreme, the routine connects it. So again, if you're in a facility where it's routinely active, you could get people that find themselves both physically and mentally exhausted. And when you have both components, the physical exhaustion, the mental health exhaustion, that could lead to concerns, people who may not see each emergent code as a threat. Just another day. And again, you don't want to get lost in that routine. So I like that. You know, it really is defined by the routine, but also being a good manager, knowing or a good supervisor, knowing how routines could affect you. I mean, this could be a whole nother dialogue. You know, basically being blinded by the routine, even being in an active facility where you would think, well, this facility is so active that people are always on their toes. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's been so active that you know what's crazy, Russ? I don't know if this matters, but maybe it's not. By the way, this will never happen. I mean, this is not like something that we could control of. But you know, I think that if you have, I think that if you have codes that kind of happen, but not overwhelmingly happen, it kind of, that's what keeps people on their toes. That's why when there's a gap, people that are in training should go ahead and push for a code or something just to keep people on their toes, like a simulated code. But when it's happening too much, that could also be a problem because people start getting disenfranchised or just, I don't have enough energy. This is just, it's every day. Like Russ said, I think it's partnered with the feeling of being trapped. This is recycled. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take some control of myself and say, I'll let this one play out a little bit because it's every day now. Fuck it. It's every day. Fuck it.
And you know,
so
that's never, I'm gonna say, you know, even though, you know, you couch it in those terms, it's almost never actually, you know, a conscious decision. It's you know, we've decided to check out. You know, that's why, you know, I came up years ago with that. You know, complacency is situational awareness perceived but not achieved. You know, you think that you are situationally aware and you're just fucking not.
Yeah, and Russ, I wonder now, because remember, now I'm going to work on another book. I'll be working on your complacency book, but think about this as a chapter. You know, a lot of people I've seen defend their position where, oh, I know my people are on point because they respond to codes every day. It's like, well, wait a second. There could be a chance where they're responding too much that could now start leaning to them being complacent just on a whole nother level. So, I mean, think about it. Everything in corrections has like this perfect line. You know, it's got to be in the middle. Never too extreme on one end, never too extreme on the other. So now imagine for the supervisors that say that my people are always on point because you know they're dealing with codes every second of the day, and then Russ could say, well, you know what? To be honest with you, think about this, guys. If you're dealing with it every second of the day, is there a chance that it's going to lose in its emergency value? Or its emergent value? Is there a chance that that could lessen because they've gotten accustomed to that as a routine? Russ, I'll be honest with you, Russ, this could be a whole another dialogue that you may even want to go solo on your Keepers of Chaos real quick to talk about. Most of us talk about complacency at slower moving facilities. We do, you know, oh, it makes sense. You know, it's not moving. Remind them, help them be on their toes. But what about complacency through exhaustion?
Yeah,
You know,
it's the difference. It's the difference between honing the knife and dulling the knife. You know, and sometimes, you know, people really don't see a difference because they are complacent. They don't understand that, you know, being too ready actually softens you.
Yeah, I love this. I mean, it starts from you're running to a code to jogging to walking, or someone else can get it. Look at that.
Yeah.
Look what we just did. You know, I mean, that's the definition of complacency right there. I'm running, I'll jog, I'll walk. Let Russ
I'm taking, and then lastly, I'm taking a coffee break.
There it is. Yeah. Hey, let's go full circle. 5 steps to complacency. All right, 2 more areas and then we're good. But Russ, I would love to maybe should get something on that. The complacency on a more active end. So Russ, you added this thought in, and I think this matters too. If the routine becomes expected chaos, there could be some people that become very tentative in how they handle concerns or how they handle situations because they're afraid at any moment it could explode. Now, mind you, as we tell you, want to have that what if, because you're right, at any moment it could explode, but there's a difference between being hesitant and being cautious. You know, I tell staff, hey, at all times, be cautious. You know, stuff could always happen, but that still means you move forward where hesitancy stops you. So when you're working at a very active facility, Russ, where at any moment something could hit the fan, something could explode, can that cause people to shift from being cautious to being hesitant? If they don't feel, let me add something to that, by the way, caveat to that. If they don't feel that they'll be protected if they do take a measure that could involve conflict with the population.
Yeah, the way I would approach that is this: is for me at least, when I look at the difference between those two words there, hesitancy is all about not knowing your role. Hesitancy is about not knowing what's expected of you in an emergency situation. Hesitancy has to do with, a lack of training, a lack of experience, and just a lack of general awareness about, perhaps policy and procedure. Being cautious, on the other hand, means that you should be moving through the evolutionary chain of what's required to, roll out any given response, but with enough deliberation in it that you're not going to make an unexpected or catastrophic mistake, and that you're able to account for all of the variables that you might not be able to see, which is kind of the exact opposite of complacency. We're not putting ourselves in a position where we're not accounting for potential pitfalls that we're not able to see yet as any given emergent situation unfolds. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. I think that's why we got to get that book from you, Russ. We got to get that book out of you, because I know it's there.
I will tell you, I know it's there. If I could, once I can tamp down on a few more of these, personal situations and just get to it.
Yeah, I mean, worst comes to worst, if I start writing this other book, there will be a section on complacency. I have you quoted in my, I definitely published your complacency thoughts, because I do have a quote from you in How to Succeed in Corrections that solidifies your quote on complacency. So we definitely have it, but I would love to explore that topic of complacency on both sides of the extreme. I really don't think that's been explored. I mean, we always explore it on the one side where it's not active, but, how about, as I said, complacency through exhaustion? I think that itself is worth a quick, little video. And again, I always say, I don't really care about who views it. I don't care about the number of views, or I don't care about, who's going to read what we wrote. I just want people to know, and I know it's a little selfish in nature, but it does matter to me, is that we said it first. It's here first. And the reason why I want that is because I'm trying to create a legacy through myself, through the people I put on this channel. And I would love, when we originate a thought, that we get credit for that thought that we're able to branch from, because we've done that. This is what Tear Talk's about. We've developed so many different perspectives. So again, something like that, Russ, I think should be something you want to solidify, where complacency at a very active facility is possible through exhaustion. And the last part of our dialogue here, and this is something that definitely relates to mental health. I'll have Russ lead the way first, because he's the one that thought of this one. Hold on, here it goes. Lack of time to process the emergency situation, and then I added understanding the cause, and I'll touch on that after Russ touches on his part. But Russ, we're going through code. I mean, where's the breather here?
That's the problem, isn't it? That's really the question is where is your chance to stop and assess what you've been through, and then more than that, do the breakdown, of where you can do an after action review and figure out where things went right and where things went wrong, rather than just simply responding to another code. I think that's where there's so much pressure now to to just run endless programs, regardless of the amount of known or unknown danger inside these. How do I put this? Inside these other incidents that take place, incidents really, truly, they're not isolated events. They're oftentimes, when you have one yard pop off, you're going to have another yard pop off. And instead of taking account for that, what do we got to do? Oh, we got to get everybody out for program, and it's program. Where's the break? Where's the accountability in doing an assessment? Just being able to, look around the yard and, hey, everything looks peaceful. Let's bring them back up. And then what happens? Maybe you luck out and maybe nothing more happens, or maybe you put them all back on their feet and they're running at each other again. I don't know. I just think there's an unrealistic expectation that you can just run program. I think that, being able to, account for getting back control and putting down potential problems and stuff speaks a lot more to, keeping a program running than just simply deciding that, hey, you know what, that's over and now we're going to run it again. So, I don't know. I think that being able to, have that break and, being able to put everything down for the rest of the day if necessary, or even if it's only 30 minutes, but just to think that, you can just do these endless, runs toward the program is self-defeating. And when you have, when you're purposefully trying to defeat your staff by putting features like that in place, and they're features, not glitches anymore, that, you're gonna reap the anti-rewards of that.
Yeah, Russ, I want to you when you defined hesitancy or being hesitant, you put a key word in there that I'm actually able to apply to this part here. It's great to see something come full circle. But you said unknown. I love how you added that in the definition, and because how it applies here is that when there's constant concerns and you don't have a chance to process it and understand where those concerns are coming from, what are the exact causes. It could cause people to be very hesitant in doing their job because they don't know where the threat is. If that makes any sense, I think when you said unknown, I think hesitancy is caused by. You're right. I haven't had a chance to process this last code. Now we're going into another one. I don't know what's causing it. So now as I'm running in, I may not have a plan. Now we're just really running in as automatons, trying to be disengaged. And then the sad thing is after you do this a couple of times, you wind up just being happy that the issue is done and you don't want to revisit it. I'm just done. I'm done for the day. I did 5 in a row. I'm done. Hold on, guys. But no, I'm done. I got no energy. I don't want to talk it. I don't want to go through it. I don't want to solve it. I'm done. It's like, yeah, but now okay, Russ.
I was gonna say, or worse yet, then you get involved in the complacency of success. Because you get in there and you're successful in a situation and the next situation and the next situation after that, and you've racked up 10 12 wins, and then you start believing in your own success. You're believing your own press, and then the next time you go into a situation, you're not paying attention. You no longer have situational awareness. You believe you have situational awareness because of your prior success, and you don't, and then you fail and something bad happens. Somebody gets stabbed, somebody gets killed, somebody gets assaulted, something bad happens based on your own success.
So Russ, we're going to have to do this. Even if you want to do it solo, you got to have to do like maybe 5 areas of least known complacency. We could talk about being complacent in success, being complacent in active facilities, whatever it is, or maybe we could just have a discussion. I could lead the way and pull all those good thoughts from you. But again, guys, not understanding the cause, could cause people to wind up just being very hesitant because, again, they can't identify a threat. That's why it's good, like Russ said, to have those after incident briefings just to kind of identify what happened, what went wrong, what could we do better, but it's also to kind of solidify any concerns that could stop someone from wanting to be just as active the next time around. I mean, that's the key. You want to keep people energized and moving forward. And if the facility has so many codes that doesn't allow for that to happen, there always has to be at one point, even I still think it's worth it even if it has to be done at the end of the day. Let's pay an hour. Let's get these guys on some overtime if possible, and just pay an hour so they could discuss the situation. Just make sure that we can put this day to a full close. Because that's another thing, guys. I mean, same thing about active facility is you never really get to close or resolve anything. I think there could be maybe something where we know that we can close it by just having a meeting and discussing it. And it may not solve it in the long run, but mentally we have done what we could to close the issue so we could safely move on to the next issue. And again, and this was a good dialogue. I mean, this is how your mindset could be affected mentally. Not everything is about you not being able to do your job. Sometimes it's just, are you really being effective? Do you know if you're really being effective or not? So sometimes it's just about making sure that you are where you need to be and you haven't accepted anything less. And that's kind of what Russ is talking about, and what we both were talking about. Hey, Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Oh, no, great dialogue. I enjoyed this very much. And, there is, definitely more material to come out of this. And we're going to be working on this in the best way we know how. And I am working on the book. It's very slow going, but, I get some of these other things cleared up, and, who knows, maybe I will be the next person to have an authorship on Tier Talk.
It's happening already. Well, you're already published through me anyway, so we're good. We got you where you need to be. Guys, just a dialogue. I thought it was a great dialogue. We definitely could explore the complacency topic, so then Russ could start taking notes from that episode and writing his book around it. I found a shortcut to writing a book. I'll give it to Russ right now. How about you create that extended PowerPoint based on what we discussed, and then you convert the PowerPoint into a small little book. That works for me when I do something. I create a PowerPoint first, which gives me the foundation, and then I do a show, and we kind of mimic what we discuss, and then we put it in a book, and it's forever crystallized. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.